uh, yeah, okay, right. Let me minimize this. Yeah. So the first talk is troubleshooting conversations, and we often had this problem of that we were trying to troubleshoot some problem with our machine or somewhere else, and we go to a either we look at search for Google, at Google for searching for a solution to the problem. So, for example, here the conversations are there's some user asking that how can she remove videos folder from the favorites folder. Similarly, there are conversations about trying to fix the bootloader, and so on and so forth. So there are multiple users because these are conversations from Ubuntu. There are multiple users. Some users are coming up with problems that they are facing, and other users are trying to respond, trying to help the person with the problem, and we want to model these conversations. So all we have are these utterances between users, multiple users, and using these utterances, between these users, we want to be able to create a model that can help the user solve the problem. Okay, at least generate a response which will be useful to the user. And this, as you can see, this is a very challenging problem. I mean, just from the utterances and they know the information, it's very difficult to decide what kind of response that you want to generate for the given in the given conversation. So traditionally, since the advent of deep learning, at least, what people have tried to do is address these kind of problems as sequence to sequence models. So the input sequence is the utterances that have occurred so far between the users, and the target sequence is the response that you want to generate. So in the previous slide, in the first case, the green box, the utterance of user one would correspond to a context, and the utterance of user two will correspond to a response. And you would use a sequence to sequence kind of model to map utterance of user one to user two. Similarly, in the case of second, you can have multiple context response pairs here. So these sequence to sequence models are very good when you want to capture the correlation between input and output, and especially when the correlation is very apparent. Like if you look at the problem of machine translation, you know that this kind of phrase approximately translates to this kind of phrase. The correlation is very apparent, and it's not very abstract. You can make out the correlation. Similarly, if you look at the problem of image captioning, if there is a dog in the image, or if there's a cat or a human or whatever, uh, the caption might contain some information about dog, cat, or human. There can be multiple captions also, depending on how many things are there, but it will be related to the image. It will be highly correlated to the image, right? And similarly, the case is with speech transcription. So in all these cases, the correlation is pretty strong. However, when the correlation is not that strong, when the correlation is abstract, and what happens is that these sequence to sequence models try to capture the abstract correlations. Uh, Especially if you look at this particular dialogue scenario, you have this context and you have multiple responses here. Now the dialogue is about issues with the CD-ROM drive, where the writing on this drive gives some sort of error, and the responses that are here are asking that, are you working on a Lenovo machine, or what is the error message that you got, or is the driver able to read CDs? So all these are valid solutions to this dialogue history. None of them are wrong solutions, because given this dialogue, the person can ask all these questions to come up with a solution, right? But one thing to notice is that all these solutions are different from each other. And the correlation that they have with context is at a very abstract level. It's very difficult to say that this should be the response for this context, right? So what happens is when the sequence models try to capture these sort of correlations between input and output, uh, where you have multiple possible outputs for a given input, resort to the safe choice. They resort to a non-informative generic response, and the reason they do is because non-informative responses are valid for many contexts. For example, look at the fourth response here. I will take 2-3 minutes to find a solution for your issue. You can use this response for any problem that you have, and it will be a valid response, although it's not going to help with the problem, but it's a valid response. And that's what the sequence to sequence models resort to when trying to handle these kind of data sets. despite this fact, variants of these sequence-to-sequence models have been used for dialogues for a long time. And the first, not the first model, but one of the most popular models was HRED. So HRED stands for Hierarchical Recurrent Encoder Decoder. So as the name suggests, the encoder is a hierarchical recurrent encoder, and the decoder is a plain recurrent network. So what I mean by hierarchical is that you have utterances which are encoded first using a RNN like GRU or LSTM or a transformer. And once these utterances are encoded, we get an embedding for each utterance, and these embeddings is what we feed to the next level of encoder. So there is something called a history encoder, which encodes the entire dialogue context and gives you a context embedding. And the history output of the history encoder is then fed to the decoder, which generates the response. It's a sequence-to-sequence network. It's just that the encoder is hierarchical, and this model is trained end to end. And once you train it, once it's trained, you can use it for generating responses for the various dialogue contexts. The second model is variational HRED, which is very similar to HRED, except the difference is that now this model has latent variables uh, for generating responses. So exactly the same as in HRED, the utterances are encoded first, and then their embeddings are fed to a second level of encoder, which generates the history embedding. And these history embeddings are used to generate the latent variables. So the latent variables here capture the diversity of responses for the context. So the idea is that since the context can have many responses, why not try to capture this diversity in responses in these latent variables themselves? That was the idea, and it's generally a continuous vector that is chosen here. Uh, Most likely a Gaussian distributed. Sometimes you also use mixture of Gaussian for the distribution of this latent variable. And once this latent variable is sampled, you feed it to a decoder along with the dialog history and generate the response token by token. So exactly the same setting as HRED, except that we have a latent variable to model in between. And the reason the name variational is used because we train this using variational training. The amortized variational inference, which was popularized by Kingma, is used for training this network. I'll not go into detail about the training, but I hope many of you might be aware of variational training. Another model is the exemplar encoder decoder. So these are all models that people have used for conversation modeling. And in this exemplar encoder decoder, what you encode the context using a hierarchical encoder. The difference is now that you use the embedding of the dialogue context to sample a response, already existing response from the response index. So given the context embedding, now you have a lot of responses that are possible. You sample some of the responses from a response index, and then the latent variable here corresponds to the responses that you retrieve from the response index. So there is a indirect route to the latent variable. The latent variables are particular scenario. The latent variables are not continuous vectors, but they are actual responses in the conversation logs, which have been retrieved using the dialog context. And now using these retrieved responses, and as well as the dialog context, we generate the ground truth response token by token. So the idea here is that we want to, in this particular model, people want to capture the fact that sometimes the parameters themselves are not enough to capture all the properties of the response. And in such a scenario, you want to retrieve something that some similar responses for the context, some responses that may be valid for the context, and use them to ground the response generation. So the response generation in this system is grounded on the responses that you have retrieved using the context embedding. And finally, there is another model called multi-resolution RNN, and which is the focus of this presentation also. I mean, the model that we will discuss is built upon this multi-resolution RNN. And the way multi-resolution RNN works is that you again encode the context. You have the utterances in the context, which are encoded using an utterance level encoder. And in this is that you also have something called concepts, utterance concepts, or context concepts, which are in the case of multi-resolution RNN are entities or activities. So you take these entities and activities and you also encode them. And these entities and activities have been annotated by humans for this data set. So we have for each, we know for this dialog set what are the entities present in this dialog set and what are the activities present in the dialog set. And given a context, we get those entities and activities and encode them along with the utterance and combine those utterance embeddings with the entity embeddings and feed them together to a context encoder. And finally, we use this context encoder to generate the concepts present in the response, which are again the entities and activities present in the response. And finally, using the entities and activities as well as the context, we generate the response token by token. So the idea here is that instead of capturing the correlation between the tokens of the input and the tokens of the output target sequence, here we are saying that we want to capture the correlation between something which is more important, which are the concepts that the input is dealing with. So for example, in the what version of Java are you using? In this particular utterance, the word Java and version are important that that must be used for generating the response, right? So these words are encoded separately and fed to the decoder. Similarly, while generating the response, you want to generate the important stuff first and then use the language model to actually complete the response generation. So this was quite an interesting idea for handling dialogues. And what the authors of this paper showed was that if you have these entities and activities available to you, you can actually improve the performance of response generation by quite a lot. You can get pretty good accuracy on this very challenging task. This is actually a very challenging task, but using these concepts, using this idea of having a second level of encoder and decoder, you can achieve a good performance on several metrics. So we wanted to utilize this idea of being able to use concepts for context as well as response, but we didn't want to assume that these quantities are available to us, because generally given a new data set, you might not know what the interesting concepts in this data set are, and you want to learn them automatically from the model. And that's the goal of this presentation. We will try to learn these concepts like Java version and all this stuff automatically from the data set, and then we will use that to generate the response. Okay, so as I mentioned, these quantities are predefined. They are already given to us for multi-resolution RNN. But what we want to do is we want to learn them automatically from the data. So here is what we want. Given conversation logs, which are nothing but context response pairs, we want a model that the model should learn to identify what are the interesting concepts that are present in the context. It should learn to generate the concepts, interesting concepts that can be present in the response. And finally, using all this information, it should be able to generate the response. That's what our goal for the rest of the presentation will be. Okay, so the architecture of this our model is going to be very similar to what we saw in multi-resolution RNN, except that everything will be learned from scratch now. So the architecture is same. We have utterance encoder, we have concept encoder, we have a history encoder, and finally we have a concept decoder and a response decoder. Everything is same as multi-resolution RNN, except now the concepts in the concept encoder and decoder will be learned using the approach that we will discuss later. So okay, up till now, if anybody wants to, or if not, I can go ahead. Is there any question? Okay, so let me describe the approach that we use to learn these.
There is a question on chat.
Okay, so
how concepts encoder are trained?
Right. So that's so in the multi-resolution RNN, concept encoder is simply an encoder. In our approach, how is it trained? We have not discussed, and that's what the goal of this presentation will be. But in multi-resolution RNN, the concept encoder. So you already know what the concepts present in the context are. You already know what the concepts present in the response are, because those are already given to you. That information is given to you in the case of multi-resolution RNN, and you just encode the utterance first and the concepts separately, and then combine the two information, the information that you have from the utterance as well as from the concepts present in the utterance, and feed that to to an encoder, and then generate the concept present in the response. Because so again, the response concepts are also already given to you. Everything is given to you in this. You're just doing it on the concepts as well as the utterance. So there are two RNNs that are working here. I hope that makes sense. Okay, all right. So this is for multi-resolution RNN. For our work, mask and focus, we will discuss how these things are learned. We've already seen this. Okay. So in our case, we want to be able to learn these concepts which are present in the context as well as the concepts present in the response directly from the data. And so the question is, what things do we want to capture in these concepts? So the idea here is that in the context concepts, we want to capture those words of the context that are useful for generating the response. And how do we define which word is useful? So what we do is we ask a question: which words in the context, if I remove, will the probability of the response drop drastically? So what are the words in the context that were essential for generating the ground truth response? I'm talking about the ground truth response here. So we already know what the ground truth response, the gold response for a context is. What we ask is that are there some words in the input context that I can drop, and such that ground truth response will drop drastically? So for example, if you look at this this example here, the context is writing CDs gives error while burning. Now here I'm asking that which word from the input, if I remove, will this of the response, the gold response, are you able to read CDs? Which word will drop the probability of this response by a huge amount? And we do this for all the contexts. For each, we take a word, we take all the contexts that this word appears in, and remove that word from all the contexts. And then we ask, okay, how much the probability of the response decreased when I removed this word from the context? So for each word, we define, for each word given a context and response pair, we define its score as the decrease in log probability when this word was removed from the context. So the overall algorithm for learning the context concepts will be that we first train a sequence to sequence model, and then we get all context response pairs that contain a specific word, and then we for each context response pair and that word, and then we take the average across all the context response pairs. So given a word, there are, let's say, 50 context response pairs which contain that word. We remove that word from all those 50 contexts, compute the decrease in probability of the response, take the average across all responses, and that gives me the average score of that word. Once we compute the average score for each word, we can sort them. We can select all words that have a score above a certain threshold. And using this, we get context concepts globally. So again, the context concepts here are obtained globally for the conversation logs. And once they are obtained, we fix them. These are the context concepts. These are the interesting things that we want to use in our model. Okay, so context concepts is the easy part. Once we have the context concepts, what can we do? The simplest thing would be to just take these context concepts, add them to the context, and then generate the response. But when we do that, what we observed was that the probability of the response does not improve by adding context concepts. So even though the context concepts are there, the response is not focusing on those concepts. The response is still focusing on the entire context words that we have added. How do we make the response look at those interesting words that we have added, that we have found and added to the context? And so for this, we come up with the idea of response concepts, that just like we have these context concepts, we should have some response concepts also. So the idea is that given the context and its concept, we will first generate the response concept. So if you look at the figure on the right, you will see that given the context and its concepts, the response concepts are generated, and given and then using the response concepts, we finally generate the response. So again, so in this case, unlike the case of context concepts, we learn the response concepts locally. That means for each response, we will compute what the response concepts are and then generate the response. And we will do this in an end-to-end way. So in the context concept, we did it globally. We obtained the context concept for all the conversation logs and we were done. But for response concepts, we will learn them along with the response by in an end-to-end manner. So the response concepts can be treated as latent variables, that they are unknown to us, and we want to marginalize, give the response. We know the context and its concepts, but we don't know the response concept. So they are latent variables for us. So we define a joint distribution over the response concepts as well as the response, and then we marginalize out the response concept from the distribution. So first of all, what is a set of what is the sample space for this response concept? So the response concepts can be any subset of words in the response. That's what we define. We define our response concepts to be any subset of words present in the response. So marginalization would involve marginalizing over all possible subsets of words present in the response. And we wanted to do something easier. So instead of that, we used a variational lower bound. And there is also some more reason for using variational lower bound. We'll discuss this later. But the idea is that instead of directly marginalizing out the response concepts, we used a variational lower bound to the marginal likelihood. And the variational lower bound has this quantity called Q, which is also called the variational distribution or the approximate posterior, or whatever you want to call it. This variational distribution, in our case, it says that given this subsets of words, what are these the response concepts? How much weight should I give them based on if they are response concepts or not? So Q, the higher the Q for a particular ZR, that means the more probability that these are actually the response concepts. So you can think of this as a weight for the response concepts, that this particular subset of words are qualified to be called as response concepts. All right. So so the aim now will be so first of all, what we will do is we will define a Q in a certain way. There are multiple ways to go about Q, but we'll use a specific way to define our Q. And the interesting thing is that whatever Q you choose, it does not matter. The inequality does not matter. The inequality is still true. Quantity on the left is still a lower bound to the quantity on the right, irrespective of the choice of Q. Generally, what people do is that they optimize Q so that the inequality becomes tight. But what we found to be work in our scenario was to choose a specific choice of Q. And the reason for the choice also will become clear later. Okay, is there any question here? Okay. Okay, so we can expand the lower bound that we saw in the previous slide. We can expand it. There are 3 terms in this expansion, and let's discuss each of these terms one by one. The first term, corresponds to the expected value of the probability of the response. ZR is the response concept. So expected, it's the expected value probability of the response concepts under Q. So maximizing this quantity corresponds to training the concept decoder. You can think of that this quantity is the PZR given C is the concept decoder, and QZR is the weight of that particular set of concepts. So ZR is a set of words or set of concepts, and QZR is the weight given to them, and PZR is the decoder. Is the distribution of the concept decoder. So maximizing the first quantity corresponds to training the concept decoder. Maximizing the second quantity. So the second quantity, what it says is that once you sample the response concepts, you use them to generate the response. So it's the response decoder. It takes the response concepts and generates the tokens of the final response step by step, right? And the final quantity it's a constant, because the way we will define q, it will be fixed, and we will not train q in this particular setting. So it's a constant for us, so we can ignore this for now. That matter to us are the concept decoder and the response decoder, and that's what we will discuss next. That how do we train the concept decoder and how do we train the response decoder. So now the training of this decoders depends solely on our choice of q. Whatever distribution we choose for q will decide how the concepts are learned and how the response is generated. So again, we will ask a question as follows. We already have context concepts, and now how to decide how much weight we give to a particular word for being a response concept. We ask that how much this word will be affected if I mask out all the context concepts. If I just take the concepts present in the context and remove them from the context altogether, how much of the probability of this word will be affected? So if the context is writing CDs gives error while burning, and we already know that writing and CDs are context concepts, we can mask them out, and now we can ask for each word how much probability of the first word R will drop if I mask writing CDs, how much will the probability of U will drop, and for each word we can ask this question, how much this probability will drop, and for each word we'll get some drop in the probability once the context concepts are masked out. And our Q for a word, the Q of the word read is the probability of the word read given when nothing was masked minus the probability of read when I have masked the context concepts from the input. So ensure that these are non-negative, we use thresholding also. And this quantity is also known as point-wise mutual information between the word read and the context concepts. So effectively, we are saying that the importance that we give to a word depends on the depends on its point-wise mutual information with respect to the context concepts. And so this is the way we have defined Q for a single word. Given a subset of words, given the subset of response concept, we define our Q to be the product of Q across all the words present in the response concept. Okay. Now, given this choice of Q, now we already know what Q is. We have already computed Q. Now, there are two parts. We have to train the concept decoder and the response decoder. So the concept decoder, we do an approximate expansion of this equation for concept decoder. So basically, it simply corresponds to that each word in the response is weighed depending on its point-wise mutual information with respect to the context concept. And we have a decoder which weighs each word in the response based on the point-wise mutual information, and then that's it. That's the equation for the concept decoder. So words that have higher point-wise mutual information with respect to the context concept will have higher weight and hence have higher probability of getting generated by the concept decoder. So the response decoder, for training the response decoder, we sample from the concept decoder Q. We sample a bunch of concepts, subset of concepts from the concept decoder, and using the sampled concepts, the response decoder attends over these sampled concepts at each time step, and it can either copy a response concept from ZR, or it can generate the next token using the language model. So it can either look at the response concept or generate the token by ignoring the response concept at each time step. And together, these two are trained end to end. So the final algorithm is as follows. Given the context, we get the context concept using the mask approach that we discussed. Basically, we ask that if I remove this token from the context, how much the probability of the gold response will be affected, and we get the conversation logs. Next, for each word in the response, we compute its point-wise mutual information with respect to the context concepts, and this gives me the Q, the weight Q. Then we train the concept decoder using these weights Q. We sample the response concept from the Q distribution. And finally, we train the response decoder to copy the sampled concepts. And this entire thing is trained end to end. Okay, all right. So is there any question here till now? All right. Okay. So once this model is trained, we want to we evaluated it on the Ubuntu dialog corpus, and we chose this particular dialog data set is because uh, it has already been annotated with entities and activities. So there we already know what the correct set of entities and activities are for this dialog corpus, and we wanted to see how much of these entities and activities can be recovered by our model in an unsupervised way. So if we don't know the entities and activities, can we still recover these entities and activities from the data set? So we already seen how the dialogues in this corpus look like, conversations where multiple users chat on the channel, and some users ask questions, ask their queries, while the other users try to help the other person. These are some of the concepts that we learned using the mask approach that we discussed earlier. And as you can see, all these terms like trash, GLX, DNS, fonts, and these are what should I say? These are things that will affect the response. I mean, if the context is about NDIS wrapper, the response should have something related to NDIS wrapper, right? So these are the things that are essential, whose knowledge is essential for generating the response here. So we were able to discover about around 3,000 context concepts from the Ubuntu data set. And for each of this context concept, we were also able to discover what are the response concepts. That means if this word is present in the context, what words should be present might be present in the response. So for example, if iPod is present in the context, the words that might be present in the response include GTK pod, iTunes, Rockbox, Media, Amarok. These are the words that are related to iPod. So as soon as the model sees iPod in the context, it assumes that the response will contain some of these information. Similarly, if unrar is contained in the context, the response might contain talk about unrar free, .rar, file roller, so forth. We did a quantitative evaluation of our model. So for this data set, Serban et al. Had already extracted a set of entities and activities for evaluating the generated response. And so since we already know what the entities and activities are, we can do evaluation based on that. If the ground truth response contained these entities and activities, does my response also contain the same entities and activities or not? Does the generated response also contain them? So based on these entities and activities, we evaluate the response, because evaluating conversations is a very challenging task, right? Because there are so many responses possible, and only one response is given as gold. So if your response that you generated might be correct, but if does not match as gold, you can get an error. So that's why instead of doing evaluation using blue and other metrics, it's common to for Ubuntu, Serban et al. Have proposed a new set of metrics, which are entities and activities. And the idea is that the model should be able to generate the same set of entities and activities that the gold response has. So these are the baselines that we use. HRED, that we have already seen what HRED is. It's just a hierarchical recurrent encoder decoder. Variational HRED is HRED with a latent variable, a continuous value latent vector. HRED attend something that we is a baseline that we designed, and the idea here is that during the response you just attend over the response. So it's just like sequence to sequence with attention, but the attention is hierarchical here. You attend over the context words while generating the response. So we wanted the model to be able to focus on some important words, and so we included this baseline also. The other two are multi-resolution network baselines. The multi-resolution noun simply uses noun along with the context to generate the response. So it extracts the noun and it says, okay, nouns are the ones that I need to focus on. I will just extract the nouns from the context. I will also extract the nouns from the response, and I will have another RNN on top of noun. So we have already seen what multi-resolution RNN is. It's just that now it extracts nouns from the context and response and applies another RNN on top of them. Finally, the last baseline, multi-resolution RNN act end, it uses annotated data. So as I mentioned, Serban have already extracted activities and entities from the data set from the Ubuntu corpus, And using those activities, they use these extracted activities and entities and feed them to another RNN and use the output of that second RNN to generate the response. So here, this last approach is kind of supervised or kind of annotated because we already know what the activities and entities are. All the other four do not assume any extra knowledge about activities and entities. So these are the performance of the various models. You can see in terms of entities and activities, as well as tense and command accuracy, VHRED, HRED, and HRED, all three perform quite poorly compared to multi-resolution RNN and also our model, which is mask and focus. Uh, surprisingly, the activity entity model, which uses annotated data, it does not perform well in terms of activity entity F1. That means it's not able to recall the correct entities present in the response, but it's able to recall the current activities present in the response. So it does a very well job in finding out what the activity of the response should be, but does not do a very well job of finding what the entities present in the response should be. Whereas Mr. RNN, noun, as well as mask and focus are able to find what the entities present in the response should be with good accuracy. So because the and mask and focus do not do a very good job of predicting the activities, you can see that the tense accuracy and command accuracy is not as high as, let's say, Mr. RNN. So we also did some human evaluation of the responses. And the way we did was we given a context, we showed them showed the evaluators. We had, I think, 7 evaluators for this. Each evaluator was given 50 responses, and each they had to rank each response based on how relevant each response was. They had to give a score to each response based on how relevant it was, and also they also had to give tell whether this response is generic or not. So we wanted to avoid generic response, right? We are trying to help a person, so we want to give a helpful response to the person rather than generic. So we wanted to see that which model does a good job of generating specific responses. And as you can see that mask and focus, the responses, gold responses are most specific. The only 5% of the responses were generic. Among other responses, mask and other models, mask and focus was able to generate non-generic, informative, higher score than other models. Also, the relevance of the responses generated by mask and focus was much higher, was higher than other models. Okay, so for qualitative comparison, these are some of the responses that are generated by various models. And as you can see, if the first context is about how installing downloads that they have got from the internet, and they ask the person asks whether the package is a rar or a tar.gz, and when the response is a rar, the response the mask and focus response that you should unrar the package, which is a valid response for this context, right? Whereas the other responses of HRED and VHRED are what version of Ubuntu are you using? I think you need to install the tar.gz file, which are not very helpful here. Similarly, from the second context, is the person reports that they have problem with Java. The response contains information about Java. It may not be the exact response that we need, but it's specific to this context. Yeah. So the advantages of this model that we discussed is that it's learning correlations at the concept level rather than the important entities and activities present in the response. And also, these concepts are learned in an unsupervised, unlike Mr. RNN, the concepts are learned in an unsupervised manner using PMI-guided variational inference. So we were also able to discover a lot of interesting concepts that were not present in the human annotations. I don't think I have shown them here. Okay. And the model is able to generate interesting responses which are specific to the input context. But other than these advantages, there are a lot of disadvantages so far. We still have not solved the problem of generating a valid response to a troubleshooting conversation. So here the concepts are mostly entities that we saw here, and we don't have something called an entity state. What the state of the entity? Like if entity is CD writer, then is it, what is the state? Like not giving an error can be in a state, giving a right error can be state. So the entities can be various states, and we don't have a way to actually automate the discovery of what the state of the entities is, because that information may be useful for generating the response. Also, there is no concept of a goal state where there's no concept that we are trying to reach this particular goal. So we're just learning it from the conversation, learning a mapping from but except that we're learning at a concept level, but there is no goal, explicit goal that has been defined where the responses are trying to reach. So generally, if you're trying to troubleshoot somebody's problem, you always have a goal in mind, like you're trying to fix the CD writer, or you're trying to fix some issue, which our current conversation models cannot capture in any way. Okay, thanks. I think that's all I have.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So any questions?